Welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you could join us today because we're embarking on a mission.
Yeah, really important one.
Exactly. To explore this true paradigm shift in how the entire world is tackling climate change.
Right.
Because usually when you hear about the climate crisis, the conversation is completely dominated by, things like new green technologies or
Solar panels, electric cars.
right. Massive international emissions targets or these huge infrastructure projects like seawalls and massive solar farms.
Which are all necessary, obviously.
Totally. But today we are unlocking a hidden solution that, it completely changes the game for you and for everyone.
It really does.
And we are grounding our entire conversation today in a highly influential report from the UNDP.
United Nations Development Program.
That's the one. And the report is titled, let me get this right, Gender Equality and Climate Action, Taking Stock of Progress and Lessons Learned from the NDC Support Program from 2017 to 2025.
It is a phenomenal piece of work, truly. Yeah. And to really establish the gravity of this source right from the start, we have to look at who is actually behind it.
Okay, lay out on this.
So this is a foundational document. It was prepared by Dr. Una Murray and Anna Leticia Mandugiano, and it carries serious institutional and financial weight.
Right. This isn't just a small indie study.
Exactly. The entire initiative was developed under the UNDP's Climate Promise Program, and it has heavy, heavy financial backing from Germany, Spain, and the European Union.
Wow. Okay, so major players.
Huge players. When global institutions of this size throw their resources behind a specific analysis, they are looking for scalable, global solutions that can actually turn the tide.
Right. But whenever I hear about a massive UN report with that kind of international backing, my immediate cynical thought is that it's just a bunch of academics sitting in a boardroom somewhere.
Theorizing about the world.
Exactly. Theorizing. Like, how do we know this actually reflects reality for people living their everyday lives?
And that is the beauty of the methodology the researchers used here. To ensure these findings weren't just, theoretical or anecdotal, they conducted in-depth case studies across 10 incredibly distinct countries.
10?
10 countries. And we are talking about an expansive geographical and cultural spread here.
Like where?
So they looked at Bhutan, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ghana.
That is quite the spread already.
Right. And they also included Guatemala, Kenya, Lebanon, Thailand, and Uganda.
Wow. Okay, so literally all over the map.
All over the map. And they meticulously analyzed national climate policies and strategic documents from each of these nations.
Okay.
Plus, they conducted these deep expert interviews with UNDP country office specialists who actually work in those specific regions.
So people on the ground.
Exactly. They wanted to look across different continents, entirely different economies, and vast cultural contexts to find the common threads of what actually works.
That makes a lot of sense. And that brings us to the ultimate hook for today's deep dive. What this massive multi-continent report actually proves is that integrating gender equality into climate action is not merely a matter of social justice.
Right.
Though, of course, that is incredibly important on its own.
Absolutely.
But what the hard data actually shows is that factoring in gender is the secret to making climate policies fundamentally more effective.
And genuinely sustainable.
Yes.
Because historically, you have to remember, climate policy has often been drafted as if the impacts of climate change are completely neutral.
Meaning what? Exactly.
Meaning there is this assumption that a drought, a flood, or a heat wave affects everyone in a community in exactly the same way.
I see.
But think about a town hit by a severe flood. A standard gender-neutral climate response might just look at rebuilding the main commercial road.
Sure, fixing the asphalt.
Right. But if you actually talk to the women in that town, you might find out that the flooding destroyed the communal washing areas they manage.
Oh, wow.
Or the local subsistence gardens they rely on to literally feed their families.
Right, things that the road engineers aren't even looking at.
Exactly. If your policy is, quote, quote, gender neutral, it completely misses the specific, critical things women need to survive and recover.
It's blind to them.
Completely blind. It proves that when you fail to account for the highly specific ways women interact with their local environments, your climate policies simply fail to work as intended.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because if we want to change a deeply entrenched system that is missing those crucial details, the first thing we have to look at is governance.
Governance, yes.
So,
nuts and bolts.
Right. Basically, if you want to change the rules of the system, you have to change who is allowed to make the rules.
You have to change who is in the room.
Exactly. So how did this UNDP program actually tackle the issue of governance on a national scale?
They tackled it by fundamentally altering the guest list in the rooms where the biggest decisions are made.
Okay.
The report highlights how the program successfully pushed for women's institutions and gender-focused actors to be explicitly included in national climate committees.
Give me an example of what that looks like.
Sure. Let's look at a specific detail from Bhutan. The program didn't just suggest a friendly collaboration between departments.
Right. No strongly worded memos.
No, it actively and structurally strengthened the crucial cooperation between Bhutan's National Commission for Women and Children and their primary Environment Commission.
Which is huge because traditionally an environment commission would probably just be filled with meteorologists, geologists, and civil engineers, right?
That is the historical norm. And those experts are obviously vital.
Of course.
But they are looking at the climate crisis purely through the lens of physical science and infrastructure.
The roads and the weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By bringing the National Commission for Women and Children to the table, Bhutan forced the conversation to include the human element.
Right.
Specifically, the humans who are actually managing the household on a daily basis.
And did they do something similar in the other countries?
We saw a very similar structural shift in Chile. There, Chile's Ministry of Women and Gender Equity was brought directly into the technical committees responsible for drafting the country's climate policies.
Directly into the technical committees.
Yes. They weren't just consulted at the very end as an afterthought or a quick rubber stamp.
Just signing off on a finished document.
Right. They avoided that. They were embedded in the highly technical drafting phase from day one.
That is such a vital shift. For you listening, imagine trying to design a comprehensive safety and emergency system for a community, but you purposefully lock half the community out of the design room.
It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't.
Sure.
If the people who are most vulnerable to the localized effects of climate change aren't sitting at the table where the policies are written, those policies will inevitably have massive blind spots.
Huge blind spots.
They will brilliantly solve the problems of the people sitting in the room and completely ignore the reality of the people outside of it.
Exactly. Without that vital representation, a government commission might write a policy that looks absolutely perfect on paper.
Perfect emissions targets.
Brilliant engineering plans. But it completely fails in practice because it ignores the daily lived reality of the women who are actually tasked with implementing those changes on a local level.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because the UNDP program didn't just stop at high-level governance and getting a few ministers a seat at the table.
No, they went much deeper.
They took those newly formed inclusive committees and moved straight into highly granular, data-driven action.
They realized they had to actually go out and prove what those blind spots were with hard numbers.
You can't just guess.
You can't. The transition from abstract planning to concrete implementation was heavily reliant on conducting deep, localized gender analyses.
Like actual field research.
Yes. A standout example from the text is the massive field study they conducted in Bhutan.
Tell me about that one.
They didn't just send out a generic survey with multiple choice questions about the weather. They conducted a highly specific, intensive study covering 600 individual households.
600. That is a lot of doors to knock on.
It really is. And the goal was to map out the distinct daily needs of women in 3 very specific sectors: energy, agriculture, and waste.
Okay, when we talk about mapping out daily needs, what does that actually look like for a household in Bhutan?
It means sitting down and asking hard questions about the invisible labor.
The stuff that usually doesn't make it onto a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It means finding out exactly how many hours a week a woman spends gathering firewood for energy versus how much time is spent actually farming.
Right.
It means understanding who is managing the household waste when there is no municipal garbage truck coming by.
Which is usually the women.
Overwhelmingly. By gathering data from 600 households, the government suddenly had a massive data set proving that energy policy and waste management aren't just abstract environmental issues.
They are deeply gendered issues.
Deeply gendered issues that dictate how women spend their entire day.
If you don't measure that invisible labor, you can't manage it.
Or help alleviate it.
Exactly. But Bhutan wasn't the only country taking this highly specific, data-driven approach, right?
Not at all. The report actually contrasts Bhutan's household study with Chile's systemic approach.
How did Chile do it?
Chile developed exactly 16 quote-unquote gender climate indicators.
An indicator.
Yes. And they didn't just publish these indicators in a standalone diversity report that gets filed away in a cabinet somewhere.
We've all seen those reports.
Right. Instead, they took those 16 indicators and baked them directly into their sectoral adaptation plans.
Okay, can you break down what an indicator like that actually does? It sounds a bit like bureaucratic jargon.
I get that. An indicator is essentially a baseline metric that forces accountability.
Okay.
For example, instead of a vague goal to, quote, improve farming, a specific gender climate indicator might measure the exact percentage of female farmers who have received climate-resilient seeds
Ah,
or drought-resistant irrigation tools compared to male farmers.
that makes so much sense. By establishing that specific metric, the government has to continually check if their climate budget is actually reaching the women working in the fields.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
can't just guess anymore.
And by having those specific metrics in place, Chile was able to actively improve women's access to energy.
Yes.
They were able to get those climate adaptive tools directly into the hands of women in the farming sector, rather than just hoping the tools trickled down to them.
The trickle-down approach rarely works.
No, it doesn't. And they took targeted steps to actively reduce the immense burdens women face in local waste management.
They effectively turned abstract data points into actual physical tools and systemic relief for people living their lives on the ground.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Please do.
all of this grassroots data collection, the 600 household surveys, and the indicator tracking eventually forced a massive change in macro policy.
It absolutely did.
Mm-hmm.
The report analyzes how this ground-level work translated into the official NDCs.
Right. And for anyone who doesn't spend their weekends reading UN climate treaties, the NDCs are the nationally determined contributions, correct?
You got it.
Basically, a country's public, binding promise to the world about how they are going to fight climate change under the Paris Agreement.
That is the perfect way to describe them. They are the ultimate homework assignments for the Paris Agreement.
Homework assignments, I like that.
And the report notes that in the second and third iterations of these NDCs across the 10 studied countries, the gender dimensions suddenly became dramatically more visible.
Because they finally had the data to back it up.
Exactly. For instance, Bhutan's 2021 NDC didn't just casually mention women in an introductory paragraph.
Right, it wasn't just lip service.
No, it explicitly and directly referenced the findings from that 600 household gender analysis we just talked about.
Wow.
The data made it into the highest level of national promise.
That is incredible.
Chile went through a similar evolution, where their long-term climate strategy was entirely rewritten to specifically account for women's vulnerabilities and contributions.
So, to make sure I'm wrapping my head around the scale of this, is it almost like upgrading a country's operating system?
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, before this UNDP program, the operating system of national climate policy was basically running on base code that didn't even recognize gender.
It was blind to it.
Right. But by rewriting the NDCs and the long-term strategies, they upgraded the core code.
They installed a necessary patch.
Does that mean every single future climate project or every new piece of policy software added to the system now has to be compatible with that gender requirement?
That is a very accurate way to visualize the impact. When you hardwire the requirement into the legal and strategic framework of the nation, it stops being a voluntary initiative.
It becomes a rule.
It becomes a mandatory filter. If a foreign investor or an international development bank wants to fund a new solar grid in Chile or Bhutan, they now have to look at the NDC and prove how their project aligns with those gender climate indicators.
The operating system simply won't run the program if it ignores half the population.
Precisely.
Of course, any grand policy or upgraded operating system is only as good as its execution.
Always the catch.
Right. How do these high-level macro policies actually survive contact with reality? What happens on a random Tuesday afternoon in a rural municipality when a mayor is trying to implement this?
That brings us to what the report calls, quote-unquote, capacity building.
Capacity building.
Yes. The UNDP researchers understood that policies written in a capital city do not execute themselves.
People do.
People do. The program recognized that they needed to train local champions to bridge the gap between the national government and the rural towns.
Okay, so how did they build that bridge?
They focused heavily on educating local gender focal points.
Which is another one of those terms that sounds very official. What is a gender focal point in practice?
Right. It is essentially a bureaucratic term for a designated local translator.
A translator.
Think of them as the vital link in the chain. These trained individuals take the high-level UN climate jargon, the complex NDCs, and the systemic indicators.
The operating system code.
Exactly. And they turn it into actionable, practical advice for a mayor of a small rural town.
That makes total sense.
They are absolutely essential for raising awareness within local municipalities and civil societies, ensuring the national policy actually changes the local reality.
So what does this all mean?
Wow.
We have the inclusive governance, we have the granular data from the household studies, we have the upgraded policy in the NDCs, and we have the local champions acting as translators.
We have all the pieces.
But none of this moves a single inch without the most critical factor of all.
Financing.
Financing. The money. How do women actually get access to the money needed to make these local climate actions happen?
The report highlights that developing tools to increase women's access to climate finance was a core, non-negotiable part of the program.
Okay, good.
They share a brilliant, incredibly concrete example of this from Bhutan, the Cash for Trash initiative.
Oh, let's dive into that because it sounds like a fascinating way to tackle multiple problems at once.
Well, it is.
How does Cash for Trash actually work?
So, backed by the World Bank, the Cash for Trash program is a perfect example of hitting two birds with one stone.
Okay.
In many rural or developing areas, waste management is informal.
Meaning there's no city dump or recycling trucks?
Right. And that burden falls heavily on the shoulders of women who have to figure out how to dispose of household garbage safely.
Which is an invisible labor we talked about earlier.
Exactly. This initiative formalizes that labor. It directly improves local waste management by incentivizing the proper sorting and recycling of materials.
Which is obviously a major environmental priority.
But simultaneously, it provides an essential, reliable supplementary income stream directly to the women doing the work.
Oh, wow. It fundamentally changes the entire dynamic.
It completely flips the script.
It stops treating women merely as victims of a changing climate who need to be saved.
Right.
And it starts treating them as compensated agents of environmental solutions.
Yes. They are managing the waste, protecting the local environment, and building a micro-enterprise at the exact same time.
That is just brilliant policy design.
It is. But this raises an important question, though.
Okay, here we go.
While initiatives like the Cash for Trash program in Bhutan are brilliant, we have to look closely at the durability of these programs.
The long-term reality.
Exactly. The UNDP report is not just a victory lap. It is a critical stocktake.
Meaning they aren't afraid to show where things failed.
Right. Dr. Murray and Anna Letitia Mandujano explicitly outline both the monumental progress made and the serious systemic hurdles that still remain.
Let's definitely look at the reality check here because no global initiative is perfect.
None of them are.
The verified strengths are undeniably impressive. The report confirms that concrete grassroots gender analyses genuinely made their way into official, binding policy documents.
Yes, that was a huge win.
And the actual participation of women in these systems meaningfully increased across different cultures.
Sure.
And there was highly valuable international knowledge sharing between these 10 diverse countries. The foundation was undeniably poured.
It was.
But what are the roadblocks they are still hitting?
The report is very transparent about the stark weaknesses that still exist. For one, in some of the countries studied, the integration of gender into climate policy remained frustratingly superficial.
Really? Even after all that training?
Yes. Despite the training and the new committees, some departments treated it closer to checking a mandatory compliance box than actually rewriting their operating system.
Ah, the classic bureaucratic box checking.
Exactly. Furthermore, across the board, there is a severe lack of long-term financing mechanisms.
Which is a terrifying prospect because adapting to climate change isn't a 3-year pilot project.
No, it's a permanent shift in how we live.
So if the grants dry up and the international funding disappears, do the local adaptation strategies just fall apart?
In many cases, sadly, yes. Without sustained financial backing, the local gender focal points can't be paid.
Right.
The Cash for Trash initiatives stall out, and the progress just reverses.
That is incredibly frustrating.
It is. And the report also points out a highly specific and often completely overlooked roadblock: the threat of institutional reform.
Institutional reform, like government changes.
Exactly. We tend to think of progress as a straight line, but local politics can actually kill momentum overnight.
Walk us through how that happens. How does a government accidentally sabotage its own climate progress?
The report cites a very specific situation in Bhutan to illustrate this. There was a broad public sector reform.
Mean what?
Essentially, a massive reshuffling of the government bureaucracy. Departments were merged, budgets were reallocated, and mandates shifted around.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
When that happens, The local champions and the gender focal points who have spent years building up institutional knowledge can easily be displaced,
They get transferred.
transferred to completely different departments.
Yeah.
The carefully constructed network of cooperation between the Women's Commission and the Environment Commission was suddenly thrown into chaos,
Just because the organizational chart was redrawn.
simply because of an org chart change. The bureaucracy itself became a direct threat to the climate action.
Man, it just goes to show how fragile this progress can be if it isn't fiercely protected and consistently funded.
It requires constant vigilance.
Absolutely. So, to synthesize this entire journey for you listening today, the UNDP's NDC support program successfully laid a monumental foundation.
A truly historic one.
By operating across 10 vastly different countries, they finally made the vital link between gender and climate visibly clear.
Yes.
They proved that you simply cannot have effective, lasting environmental policy without equitable social representation.
They proved it with data.
Right. They brought women into the highest governance committees. They funded massive, granular data collection efforts like the 600 household study in Bhutan to track invisible labor.
They forced permanent policy upgrades in the NDCs.
And they proved out brilliant economic models, like the Cash for Trash initiative.
But the final urgent conclusion from the authors of the report is that the ultimate success of the Global Paris Agreement targets now heavily depends on what the international community does next.
What happens when the spotlight fades?
Exactly. We have the models, we know they work. We have the data proving that gender integration creates better environmental outcomes.
The blueprint is there.
The blueprint is flawless. But success depends entirely on scaling these exact experiences globally.
Right.
And crucially, backing them up with serious, dedicated, long-term financing.
Because without the money,
Without the money to sustain them against bureaucratic shifts and economic downturns, these brilliant frameworks will remain just that, frameworks.
papers on a desk.
Papers on a desk.
The report proves, without a doubt, that climate adaptation works best when it specifically addresses the daily, often invisible burdens of women,
Like managing household waste when there are no municipal services.
or securing reliable energy for their families day in and day out. As you go about your day and look around your own community this week, ask yourself, who is bearing the invisible burdens in your local systems?
It is a profound question.
It really is. And how might solving their specific everyday problems be the unexpected key to solving our largest, most overwhelming crises?
We can't fix the big things until we look closely at the small things.
Perfectly said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep looking for those hidden connections, and we will catch you next time.